It is a tremendous privilege and honor of mine to have the opportunity to introduce our keynote of the Labor Speaker Series this year, International Brotherhood of Teamsters General President Sean O'Brien. President O'Brien is a fourth-generation member of the union, having got his start as a heavy equipment driver in the rigging industry at the age of 18. In 2006, he became the youngest president in the long history of Teamsters Local 25 in Boston, and under his leadership, that local increased its membership by more than 25%. In 2011, he was elected Eastern Region Vice President for the IBT, and in March of 2022, about a year and a half ago, he was elected as the 11th General President of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. In addition to having led a successful contract campaign with UPS, the nation's largest private sector union employer, and having overseen all matters involving the IBT's 1.2 million members, President O'Brien has, over the past few months, spent time advocating for working people and working class interests on TV, on Capitol Hill, and all over the place. So it goes without saying that those of us at the CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies are incredibly grateful that he's made the time to be here with us today, and we're incredibly proud to have him open our speaker series this year. So please join me in welcoming IBT General President Sean O'Brien.
Thank you very much. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today. I want to thank, obviously, the Labor Council. I want to thank Sarah for all her great work. But more importantly, I want to thank all of you for giving us the opportunity to tell our story and to give you some insight on where we think the labor movement is headed, and strictly a perspective from the Teamsters Union. But I think we're pretty close to knowing what's going on in the industry and what's going on in corporate America, and what the thought process is from the political aspect of the United States of America. So before I get into giving you a little bit of history on what we achieved recently at UPS, I want to recognize our Joint Council 16 President, Tom Giswalty, who is responsible for overseeing all the Teamster local unions in downtown New York. And also the Secretary-Treasurer, who thankfully the service elevator worked, because we were sweating at walking up 18 flights of stairs, right, Demos? Demos Demopoulos as well, the Secretary-Treasurer, Joint Council 16. So look, we achieved history collectively in the Teamsters Union about a month ago today, and we were able to secure the largest, most historic collective bargaining agreement in the United States of America. It is the largest private sector collective bargaining agreement covering 340,000 men and women throughout the United States. It's a contract that's very diverse, very intricate, and it's one of a kind when it comes to achieving the goals and objectives that our rank and file members set forth. It's a population where 54% of the workforce is part-time, and the remainder of the workforce is full-time. And when we went into these negotiations, we had clear and concise objectives. And those objectives were met because we had rank and file interaction, which is the most important tool and the most vital leverage that you can utilize in any and all negotiations. And what we did differently this time, and the Teamsters Union, and I can say this because I'm 4 generations, I've held every single position within the organization. We were antiquated previously as far as our thought process, and we were campaigning to take back our international union. You often heard our rhetoric, or my rhetoric, saying, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So when we took over leadership 18 months ago, it was clear and concise that what we were doing was not working, it was antiquated, and we needed to not lose sight of our core values and institutional knowledge and generational knowledge that's passed down, but we also had to incorporate the new way of thinking, a more sophisticated way of thinking, a more sophisticated way of getting our messaging out. Back 40 or 50 years ago, when you negotiated a contract as a union leader, you came in and banged your hand on the table and said, these are our demands or else, and through fear and intimidation, you usually got what you wanted, which was a good thing. But unfortunately, times change and tactics needs a change, and that was one of our goals and objectives in this UPS agreement. Now, historically, the Teamsters Union have been involved in 4 national negotiations, would go in a year prior to the contract expiring. We also have, outside of the national agreement, contained in the national agreement, we've got 44 supplements, addendums, and riders. And those supplements, addendum, and riders, for everybody's clarification, are basically local area working conditions and also different benefit packages. So we had to navigate through a lot of intricacies, as I stated earlier. But historically, we'd go in, negotiate the national agreement, and then focus on the supplemental agreements. And the supplemental agreements are probably more important than the national agreement because those are the local area conditions. Those are the conditions outside of the national that are germane to the communities and neighborhoods and the geographies that people work. And they're all different. Some are high cost of living areas like, New York City, Boston, San Francisco. Others, maybe more rural, doesn't require a whole lot of cost of living, but the contracts are the same throughout. So it was important that we recognize that we needed to take on this animal with a whole different approach. And often 2 times we were going into negotiations as a Teamsters Union, impatient, wanting to get the deal done. What we did as a leadership team, not only at UPS, but right off the bat, we had 3 national contracts up. And we made a statement right away that we were not going to negotiate beyond expiration dates of contract. We were not going to make extensions because that's convenient for the company. That's convenient for corporate America. That's convenient, but it's not convenient for our members. It's not effective for our members. So what we did with UPS is we gave a directive, and what's important now, I think, in the labor movement that we haven't been able to do, but we recently have done this at UPS, we, the union, control the narrative and flow of how these negotiations were going to go. And we dictated to the company that we were not going to start negotiations 6 months prior to the contract expiring, and we would not start national negotiations until all 44 supplements had a tentative agreement subject to ratification of the national agreement. So we put a mandate on the supplements first, which we've never done before, shorten the window of negotiations, put deadlines on these negotiations, but the most important thing that we had for the first time ever in these negotiations, we had rank and file members represented by every classification sitting at these negotiations across from what I call white-collar crime syndicates, corporate America. And, when you go into negotiations, historically, you would sit there across the table from your opponent with no representation from the rank and file, and you would actually give secondhand testimonials to your opponent who would go back and negate and disparage anything you've said. This negotiation concluded that we had tremendous support, but also testimonials from the people sitting there. The single mothers who are working 3 and 4 jobs, who may be on subsidized housing or subsidized meal plan, trying to provide a living for their families, saying that $16.25 or $16.50 per hour was not enough, without opportunities for full-time jobs. You had package car drivers who were working in Arizona with excessive heat and issues where people were dying on the job because there were no air conditioning or proper ventilation in these package cars. And many, many more testimonials where when you're getting it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, there's not a whole lot you can contradict and or try and negate. So that proved to be the most effective tool. But prior to going into these negotiations, we did what has never been done before. We actually identified every single issue that was specific to every single member that worked in the bargaining unit that needed to change. And that resulted in 60 non-economic changes in the largest collective bargaining agreement, all favorable for our rank and file members that work at UPS without one concession or give back. As we all know in negotiations, thank you. As we all know in negotiations, there always was this attitude from both sides that if you want something, you have to give it back. Well, that's not true. That is not true. And we proved that moving forward. But what made us a success in validating all these demands was that we started a contract campaign 1 year prior to the contract expiring, identifying, and you've probably heard me say this a lot on national TV, stating our intentions on what we needed to see change in this agreement. Now, we had a great amount of leverage outside of 340,000 rank and file Teamsters. We had a company that provided 7% of the gross national product, and we also had 1 out of every 4 package was loaded and delivered on a UPS truck. So we had tremendous amount of leverage with some scrutiny from, the other white-collar crime syndicate known as politicians in Washington, D.C. that were looking to blame anybody for potentially throwing this country into a recession. Well, our attitude was all along that we know who we work for. We work for the rank and file members at UPS, and we do not work for politicians, and we do not work for white-collar crime syndicates known as corporate America. We work for the hard-working men and women who provided goods and services through the toughest times and proved our worth that we were essential through the pandemic. So we had a lot of credible arguments, and we stated our intentions clearly throughout this campaign. We went city by city, state by state, location by location, identifying and articulating what needed to change in this contract. And our narrative the whole time, because I think what people see is, why does a union want to strike a company? Why does a Teamsters union want to strike UPS? And our response to that was, we don't want to strike UPS if UPS does not concede to the demands and change their behavior and reward the people that actually make them the success, and not worry about the balance on the balance sheet at the end of the day, and reward the people that make them the success, then UPS will be choosing to put themselves on strike. So we were clear, we stated our intentions, and we went and negotiated the most lucrative historic agreement in the entire country, which was ratified by 86% of our members. But that wouldn't have been possible without demonstrating what we were capable of. I think through July, if everybody was paying attention, talks broke down on July 4th or 5th, July 5th at 4 a.m. when UPS chose to walk out when they said they had no more to give. And we strictly demanded that they come back to the table. They refused. That's when we unleashed our practice picketing. And we were preparing for a year. We were preparing the narrative, but we were also preparing the most important leverage we had was the rank and file members. We did an onslaught of practice picketing in every single location throughout the United States, every single morning and every single night, demonstrating not only to UPS the solidarity, but to the general public on how important, how vital, and how essential our members were. UPS, after getting tormented on national TV, decided that they were in a position where they couldn't defend their position anymore, because we also did something that we never did before. We actually did a deep dive, and I think this will be the template moving forward for any and all negotiations with any and all unions, is that we got a little more sophisticated. And we took this argument to the street where we exposed they made $100 billion as a result of the pandemic. They also rewarded their stockholders 50% increase in dividend payments in January, and also gave out record bonuses for upper management and CEO. And that did not resonate well with the general public. That didn't resonate well with the customers. That didn't resonate well with our members that were working there. So they knew we were poised and ready to take on this fight. The one thing we did also is we leveraged our political influence in Capitol Hill. 18 months ago, prior to us taking over as new leadership team, we kind of fell in love with our captors, so to speak, in Washington, D.C. We would give them all kinds of money with all false hopes and promises, and they never delivered. And we fast forgive and forget what they didn't do for us. This time we made certain that we said we don't want any influence from Washington, D.C. We don't want politicians getting involved in our business. My neighborhood where I come from, if two people are fighting in the middle of the street and you've got nothing to do with it, you just keep walking. We made it clear that we did not want Washington, D.C. and or politicians coming in for a couple of reasons. One, because it would signal that we were weak and that we were conceding to corporate America, and two, that we didn't need anybody else in our fight, and we didn't want anybody else trying to claim victory on behalf of the 340,000 rank and file members who emboldened us and entrusted us with their future. So it was very important that we control that narrative. And look, I think it was the most successful agreement. We protected against technology. We protected against an invasion of privacy with inward-facing cameras. We protected jobs from being replaced with autonomous vehicles and tractor trailers. We created 7,500 new jobs. We also got an agreement where they have to replace 22,000 jobs that are set to be retired. And they also agreed that in the event technology, for some reason, does diminish some of the functions, that they will bargain the effects and create new full-time jobs as a result of technology. So we are extremely, extremely successful in many different areas. But the most important one, I believe, outside of taking care of everybody there, was the part-timers in America. These part-timers, this fight for 15 that we always heard of, and I think New York led the charge about a decade ago, fighting for $15 per hour. That was an antiquated argument that we could not allow to happen at the table. I mean, you think about a $100 billion company per year in earnings, and one of the most successful companies, and you have your employees working 2 or 3 jobs, living in government housing, or some in shelters, homeless. Pretty embarrassing for the brand, and we were able to expose that. We were able to get UPS to bring those folks that are at $16.50 per hour, immediately up to $21 an hour. Longevity bonus is in 2027. Starting rate of pay will be $23 an hour. That was a 48% increase in wages for our part-timers at UPS, which is unheard of. We were also able to protect, preserve, and improve the benefits. Make sure that people had health care that was fully paid by the employer, Teamster Healthcare. And I got to tell you, as a 4th-generation Teamster, and we didn't have a whole lot going on, but we knew we had the best organization backing us, Teamsters Union. I've had Teamsters Healthcare. April of 2024, it'll be 52 years I've had the same benefits, and I know how important those benefits are. I was fortunate to learn about the Teamsters Union around the dinner table. Being a 4th-generation Teamster, no one else ever held office. It was all rank and file. And every narrative around our dinner table was about the Teamsters Union, about the benefits, how important it was. This is an organization, no matter how bad it gets, that is always going to be there and never leave us. We were able to give that hope back to that next generation, and more importantly, educate this next generation of workers throughout this process, because many of our part-timers have no generational connection to the Teamsters Union. And we were doing contract campaign rollouts, when we were doing practice picketing, those 20, 21-year-olds were never so inspiring to me to see that there is hope, there is determination to fight for what is important, to fight for the rights that have been fought for us for over 100 years, and to protect, preserve, and improve working conditions moving forward. So that was a tremendous success, and I think, I know that this is the template throughout the union movement on how to actually design, execute, and ratify a collective bargaining agreement. But more importantly, it sets a tone for how corporate America should be dealt with. We were able to expose this company on their earnings. We were able to expose this company on lack of respect for the people that make them a success. But more importantly, we were able to hold them accountable because we had a credible threat of a militant union that wasn't afraid to strike. And I think we all have to recognize that sometimes the threat is worse than the action, especially when you can demonstrate the solidarity and the collaboration. I mean, look, the power of collaboration to effectuate change was never so evident in what we just achieved in this UPS agreement. And why is that important? It's important for our UPS workers, but I think it's important for the labor movement, because the one thing we haven't done good in a labor movement is organize new members. I think, for too long, and that's one of the reasons why, our leadership team, when we decided to run 3 years ago, we were sick and tired of seeing that our organization was being babysat. There was no progressive movement. There was no thinking. There was no direction. There was no plan to organize. We were just sitting back, hoping for the best and, throwing our hands up with no real plan to make this union bigger, faster, or stronger. So what we did with the UPS agreement and all the other agreements we did, DHL, American Red Cross, we got record earnings. We got record benefit increases, ability to organize with card check neutrality. But we've shown corporate America that we are not afraid to fight. And you can't be afraid to lose, because it's a battle you may lose, but the war is going to go on forever and ever. And so when we negotiate these contracts, that's a vital part of organizing. Because I think we all can recognize through social media, through this next generation, that there is a thirst for knowledge. And people want a demonstration right now of what they are going to get if they organize and join a union. It's unfortunate, and our labor laws are so weak right now, and that corporate America and these big companies like Amazon and Starbucks, they spend hundreds of millions of dollars per year trying to bust unions all over this country. And it's actually disturbing when you organize and it takes 400 days on average to negotiate a substandard first contract. But when you have strong contracts that set industry standards, and you go to workers that are non-union, that are doing the same work as our members at UPS, our members at DHL, our members in the Republic Waste, our members in construction, and you show them the highest standards, where you show them you're going to be guaranteed wage increases, you're going to have cost of living increases, you're going to have fully paid medical, you're going to have pensions that you're going to be able to retire on and maintain your lifestyle when you retire, but more importantly, you're going to have dignity and respect in the workplace. That is going to be our biggest tool to organizing. And Amazon, as we've made no secret from the Teamsters Union, they're a major target for us, and we are going after them with everything we have. And Amazon is not just a threat in the parcel delivery business. It's in the grocery distribution, and I think right now, if we see what's going on in Hollywood with the Writers Guild strike, with the Screen Actors Guild strike, 10, 15 years ago, and I know a little something about the motion picture industry, corporate America wasn't involved so much in the motion picture industry. But now you have Netflix, you've got Amazon, you've got Apple, you've got Disney, you've got streaming media, and all they're concerned about is their bottom line of the balance sheet. All they're concerned about is how they can do their work cheaper and make the most amount of money, how they can utilize artificial intelligence. So this fight that we're taking on with Amazon or any other corporation or any other global company may not affect what you're doing right now or the industries you represent, but at some point in time, it could affect you. There is an ancillary benefit and a potential for disaster if we are not collaborating and fighting. Even though that fight may not be yours today, it could be yours tomorrow. You look at the United Auto Workers right now. They're in the battle of their life, and I commend them for taking on the big three. I commend them for taking the fight on. But they're in an uphill battle, and they need us, organized labor, to come together. And we talked about being collateral damage if we're not supporting our brothers and sisters. We have 4,000 members in the Teamsters Union that haul cars out of these manufacturers every day. High-paid, middle-class jobs. If UAW does not win this strike, then they are going to look to take on the Teamsters Union. They're going to look to take on other unions, and it's going to send a message to corporate America that organized labor is not willing to fight. And we cannot leave our brothers and sisters in any union alone to fight on their own. We need to collaborate, but more importantly, we need to put our differences aside, like at that dinner table I talked about in my house, and there was a lot of dialogue, there was a lot of criticism in an Irish Catholic household. But the one thing we were taught by a strong woman who brought us up was that when we walk out this door, regardless of what we talked about, regardless of our differences of opinions, we are walking out this door, one voice, one mission, and that's to protect the family, and our family is organized labor. So we need to do a better job of doing that moving forward. But look, I think we're in a great opportunity as unions go. I think we've proven collectively we're not afraid to fight. I think we've also captured, a difference of opinions through the pandemic on how essential we are providing goods and services to this country. But more importantly, we recognize and we point out how ineffective some of these politicians that we elect are. And as labor unions, we need to do a better job of selecting the candidate, not so much based upon our personal issues and our social beliefs, but we got to elect candidates that are going to enable us to put food on our family's table, to buy a home, to put our children through college, and to ensure that we retire with some respect and dignity. All too often, these politicians, and I've seen it in my 18 months in Washington, D.C., they are corruptible. They fall in love with big business, big money, and they forget about the people they're elected to represent, and that's the constituents, that's in their neighborhood, that's you and I, those are our members. So we have to remind them, and we've done a pretty good job of reminding these politicians, and this isn't just a Republican issue, Democratic issue, independent issue. We've got to also learn how to work together politically to ensure that these big corporations like Amazon, like Elon Musk, like Starbucks, do not dictate policy for working people in this country. We're going to make certain the people that we elect truly are working for their constituents, and that is the American public. Now, look, you've heard me say this time and time again. We are 1.3 million members. We were 1.2 when we took over, so we've had some growth in 18 months. But we cannot be afraid to take on the fight. We cannot be afraid because of risk. We cannot be afraid because of threats from corporate America or politicians. We have a saying at the Teamsters Union that we would rather ask for forgiveness than permission. And the one thing that's clear is that this fight is going to continue. We owe it to the people that have paved the way for us. We owe it to the future members, but you owe it to yourselves to have the courage and conviction to take on that fight. And I got a message on behalf of the Teamsters Union, 1.3 million strong. When you take one of us on in organized labor, you take all of us on, and it's a full contact sport. Put your helmets on and buckle your chin straps. Thank you very much.